Okay, everybody, this is going to be a really good talk. So if you want to text your mates and tell them to hurry up, and then we can close those doors and get started. But today I am absolutely delighted to introduce Hannah McKee. Hannah McKee is about to talk to us about something really super important. So take notes and listen a lot and be alert. Embracing the challenge, how to take your team from toxic to thriving. So once Hannah's completed her talk, if there's any questions, please put your hand up and one of our colleagues from NIDC will hand you a mic. So let's all welcome Hannah to the stage.
Thanks. This room's really big and I'm really nervous, so whatever happens, just go with it, okay? Sweet. Also not a techie talk at all. The only techie thing really is that this title was created by ChatGPT, so we'll just go with it. So I feel like I need to start by saying that no organisation is perfect, and the things I'm going to talk about here, if your team has some of them, doesn't mean you've got a toxic team. Like, you don't need to leave your job, it's okay. But also it's not an exhaustive list. So if you're sitting going, I've got all of them but one, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not a toxic team. And it doesn't mean you can't fix some things. So before I actually start, who is Hannah? I have about a decade's worth of experience in the industry. I'm a principal engineer at Instill. I'm a dork by day, and if I'm not at my desk, you can probably find me laughing at a joke nobody else is laughing at, or in the gym powerlifting. So it's a weird mix. So the first thing I want to talk about, what are some of the challenges with a toxic team? There's some really well-known, obvious symptoms, like everybody keeps leaving, nobody's talking, but there's some that are really not quite as obvious and nobody really talks about as much, and that's whenever your devs don't have a lot of attention to detail, or they lack any confidence to try new things, or you've no new technologies, you're still using something from 20 years ago because everybody's too scared to change it. So the first challenge I want to talk about is disastrous dynamic. So Charles Handy, who's an Irish author and philosopher, said, "A good team is a great place to be, exciting, stimulating, supportive, successful. A bad team is horrible, a sort of human prison." And anybody who was in my previous team on the project we were working on will know exactly what I'm talking about there. So what are some of the symptoms of a disastrous dynamic? Like, what does that actually mean? So you'll have real poor communication. Maybe there's loads of side conversations happening and you just hear about it whenever somebody says, "Did you not know?" "No, I didn't. I was left out." There's no trust. And that makes people really hesitant to share info. So in particular, struggles and blockers, like if you're sitting in stand-up every morning and somebody's worked on the same ticket for 3 days and they're going, yeah, sweet. It's not. Makes it really difficult to share feedback, whether that's good or bad. And you'll find people they don't want to collaborate with anybody. "No, I don't want to work with you, it's fine, I've got it." That often leads to micromanagement, and that's how people will think they can resolve this. And there's loads of ways you'll see that in teams, but some of the things that we found really difficult were unfounded negative comments. "You're not being as productive as you should be." What does that mean? How am I not being productive? Show me the numbers. Tell me how. That's really difficult with engineers. So as an engineer, you have a really specialised skill set. Whenever somebody is breathing down your neck every 5 minutes, it starts to feel like, they don't trust me. I've worked for this. They don't trust me to do what I'm doing. Then when things inevitably go wrong because you're just so pissed off you can't be bothered anymore, they start to blame you. Things go wrong, always. And how your team responds is really, really important. Like if your team is pointing fingers and assigning blame, like stop a minute and step back. So how can we actually start to fix a disastrous dynamic? There's loads of things you can do, but some of the things that we have found really useful are encouraging open communication. So engineers, like by default, are nosy as anything. So use a shared calendar. Like nobody wants their time wasted with meetings they don't want to be in, but we found that putting required participants on invites and putting them in a shared calendar meant if somebody was a wee bit nosy and they didn't have too much on that day, they could come and listen, or they could say in stand-up the next morning, like, what happened there? It just gives a wee bit more transparency. I use open forums like Slack channels rather than DMs, so everybody can see them. They can catch up in their own time. They can chime in if they have a point. Like, that's something that you don't even need to think about doing. Just do it. It's going to cost you nothing. Within Instill, in particular, compared to anywhere else I've worked, we also promote a culture of curiosity and welcome questions. It's really useful to get different perspectives, especially outside your team. Just because your team has a real issue or a problem with something doesn't mean you can't say to everybody else, I thought there's a really shitty issue, like, what do I do? And still have a few people that will always answer you too. The other thing that we have started implementing is breathing space. I've seen it called different things online, but basically it's just taking a break. So, like, take an hour a week. We used it. We had an hour a week on a Friday afternoon in our calendars, and everybody used it for whatever they wanted. Maybe it was, I'm going to read one of those million blog posts that I have bookmarked, or I'm going to write the blog post that I've been telling my manager I'd write for 6 months, or I'm going to check out a new framework, or actually I'm just going to read something that has nothing to do with what I'm working on because I just need a break. And all of those things will start to really help your team. The next thing I want to talk about is documentation. I love a good bit of documentation, and sometimes my team hate me for it. But Michelle Mulders, I don't know if I said that right, that's the way it looks, said good documentation is like a roadmap to your project. It tells you where you've been and where you're going, and it helps you avoid getting lost along the way. This is particularly important in legacy projects. And I don't just mean like technical documentation, I mean process documentation. And the thing that people maybe forget about quite often is product documentation. That's really important. Like, if you don't know what it does, how are you supposed to build it or fix it? So what are some of the symptoms when this is not there, like it doesn't work? Knowledge silos is probably one you've seen. Everybody's seen it at some stage. And if your team is really toxic and everybody's leaving all the time, that's really difficult, because now Bob that built it's left, and I don't have a fucking clue what's going on. That makes you become decreased in how much you can fix and how well you can fix things. Things like onboarding become really difficult, because now I don't know what's going on and I need to find it every time somebody new starts in the team. Simple tasks become adventures into troubleshooting. We saw that a lot on our previous project. Managers would say something like, yeah, but just fix it. Fix that text box. And all of a sudden I'm like a million lines deep trying to work out where the text box actually gets set. Like, that's not a good experience. Without having anything documented, those things are made worse, because I don't even know what it's supposed to do. So how can I check my work? This all makes innovation really slow too. Without having that solid understanding, you can't iterate on what's there, and you often end up in that like loop of, fuck it, I'll just write it again, I can write this quicker. And then the next person goes, he wrote no documentation, so I'll go again. And that really doesn't fix anything. It all makes it really difficult to collaborate with anybody too. Like, if nobody has that shared understanding, how can you even start a conversation? Your conversation actually ends up being, jeepers, I need to work out what's actually going on here. Whenever this isn't there, it's really difficult to try and fix it too, because you're just so overwhelmed with the lack of anything. So one of the things we really found helpful whenever we were faced with this was to identify the main pain points. If you come across something and you go, I wish there was documentation for this, write it down. If it keeps coming up over and over again, document it. Start with that one thing. It seems like a really small step, and you go, I can't, like, that's just a tiny bit, it's going to make no difference, but it really will. Like a baby step here feels like a massive step. But that only really works if you're going to validate it. So if I'm writing documentation for onboarding, for example, make sure you try it with somebody who's onboarding and get some feedback. If I write onboarding documentation and I've been on the project for 6 years and I made all these assumptions, I go, what use is it to somebody who's just joined? You need somebody who is in the audience to actually tell you whether it's right or not. We also started checklist documentation. So all our PR checklists would say, is there documentation for this? And that made a developer think, oh no, I didn't really do documentation here, do you need to? Well, maybe I probably should. And stop compounding the issue as you go forward. One of the things that's always left out, not always, most of the time left out from documentation is the why. So maybe I'm writing a piece of documentation about how to use the framework that we've selected, how to do all these different things, how to test it, what happens when it goes wrong. But what you don't see a lot of the time is why you chose that framework, and that's really important. Maybe not now, like maybe I don't care now because everybody in the team knows why I chose it. But in 6 months' time, when it's a different team trying to maintain it, or I've just been away from it from 6 months, it's good to know why you chose that and whether that's still the right decision or not. And assumptions are really dangerous. So if you're writing a piece of documentation about, I don't know, probably should have added that to my notes, something, and you've made assumptions about who's reading it and how much knowledge they have, call that out at the start of the documentation. Say, like, I expect you to know everything there is to know about TypeScript, and add a few links in, and that allows whoever's reading the documentation to make a good judgment about whether they should continue or actually do they need to take 15 minutes and read something else. Blasted burnout. I feel like this is really important to talk about. So a recent Haystack survey showed that 83% of developers suffer from burnout. That's huge. That's a really, really big number. And often people, I think, assume that burnout is somebody that they can't get out of bed, they just physically cannot do it anymore, but that's not really necessarily the way it will show itself. Maybe you're sitting every day going, I can't go to work. Like, and I don't just mean a shitty day, I mean like you physically don't want to face it anymore. Your productivity is way down, the quality of your work is way down, people in your team are getting pissed off because you're not delivering stuff that you said you would deliver. And then if people feel in your team that they're not getting the support they need when they feel like that, they'll just leave. And now that's not fixed anything really. And then that ripples through the team, makes everybody feel bad. But it's also really difficult to speak up if that trust isn't there within a team. And I don't just mean telling people that you're burnt out. I mean, because you're burnt out and you're feeling all of this overwhelm, you're in calls and you're not hearing what people are saying. Everybody else in the room has heard it, and you're going, oh, I can't ask, they'll think I'm stupid. And that just makes it really hard to continue at all. So I think that, I was going to say the easiest way, the best way to fix this is to have a team that has loads of trust in it. That's very difficult to add if it's already toxic, but difficult decisions will always be easier if you trust who you're talking to. If you know that everybody you're talking to in that team has the same intention to make the project better and it's coming at it from the right angle, it's way, way easier. And talking about it is really important. In our previous project, there was a member of the team feeling like this, and once they talked about it, I think that just relieved some of the pressure. But if you're not sure, or you don't know who you can talk to, or you don't want to bring it up because it feels embarrassing sometimes, I get it. Retros are a really good place to bring it up, like without all of the pressure around it. So maybe just say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed with this ticket, I need a bit of help. And you'll be amazed at how many people say, actually I have no clue what's going on there either. I like to deal with things with a bad joke, and adding a wee bit of fun to the project will help. Like, if you're not having a bit of crack, then what's the point, really? This one might be a wee bit controversial. I don't know how people feel about it. A context switch. So if you're feeling really overwhelmed with something, take 10 minutes, go away, I don't know, do something that you know that you can finish in 10 minutes, that you know inside out. It's the easiest task you've got. Go and do it. You'll feel great. Come back to what you were trying to do. And sometimes you'll go, oh yeah, I'll just Google that. But give it a try and see what happens. So as well as some of the challenges, always you can learn something if you look hard enough whenever there is a challenge. Psychological safety is something that you hear people throw about all the time. And I think until a recent project, I was really lucky to never really know what it meant, because I'd never really felt what it was like when it wasn't there. But whenever it leaves quickly, and it's not pleasant for the team. But like, how does your psychological safety get affected in a team if it's not there. So this can look like exclusion. Maybe people are always excluded from meetings, or whenever certain people start talking, somebody always talks over the top of them. Some people just don't bother turning up to meetings, which is even more frustrating. But one of the easiest ways to make people not feel safe is to blindside them. And as engineers, that's really, really horrible to feel like. And that can be done in loads of ways, like adding things to a sprint really impulsively without talking to you first. Just telling you, oh, if somebody new coming tomorrow, or actually, yeah, that person left on Friday, they're gone now. Like, why are you telling me that now? Mis-selling of the product or your feature to customers can blindside a dev if they don't know that it's happening. This one is particularly annoying to me. Little prep time for meetings. Like, people always say to consider people's time. That doesn't just mean the time they're in the meeting. It means the time they need to prep before the meeting, and also the time they need after to decompress and take in what they've heard in that meeting. You'll often find when there's little psychological safety, there's really big egos. And that'll be people that refuse to say, I messed up here. They have no feelings. They always do better than everybody else. And then when you do tell them, that thing you did didn't really work and there's a problem, they'll get really defensive and aggressive about it. And that's just really shitty. If this happens in your team, how can you make it better? It can be fixed quite a lot with effective communication. But in a team that's like that, that can be really, really difficult, especially if you don't have that trust. One of the other things you can do is to embrace learning within your team. If your team starts to learn together, to try new frameworks together, to just try out processes, whatever it might be, then they'll all learn how to fail. And they'll all get a short feedback loop. And that's going to make it way easier whenever they do fail in their actual development. If you've got so far that things are this bad, one of the things that we found really helpful was an anonymous survey. That gives everybody a place where they can go and they can look to see, like, they can say, yeah, I felt a wee bit shitty whenever this happened in the meeting. I think we need to look at meetings being put in a day away or something like that, because there's no blame. But what we also found real quick was if you do those surveys and you do not act on the results, it's going to be worse than if you never asked the question in the first place. So if you're going to ask the question, be prepared to do something about it, or just keep quiet. So one of the other lessons we learned was about coordinated chaos. So you often find, like, in projects that are really toxic, or teams that are really toxic, everything's really chaotic, everything's really, really fast. Nobody really knows what their role is. Nobody knows what their responsibilities are. Everybody's pitching in with all the tasks. And then you always find, that thing there wasn't done at all, because I thought she was doing it, and she thought I was doing it, and he thought they were doing it. And it gets really messy really, really quickly. Nobody knows what your goals are. Like, I mean, your ultimate goal, nobody knows what it is. There's no communication about when a ticket is going to be done, because everybody's so frantic. Like, I'm sure probably most people in the room have seen it. Whenever every issue is urgent, it's just different levels of urgent. Urgent 1, urgent 2, urgent 3. Right, I get it. Right, you want everything yesterday. Okay. This often leads to really frequent scope changes. So you never get a chance to actually just work on something the right way. And you'll find whenever your team is like this, that you'll not have very many learning or growth opportunities, because there's no time for it. It's way, way down the list of priorities. So what can you do to try and coordinate the chaos? One of the first things we implemented in this team was blameless post-mortems. So whenever something went wrong, we would have a checklist. We would go through what went wrong, why it went wrong, what triggered it, and what could be done to mitigate it, and how we resolved it at the time. It doesn't really do much. Like, I haven't actually done anything different than dealing with the issue. But what I have done is made everybody in the team feel like, okay, it's all right, I know what's happening here. Like, I have my checklist, I'm going to run through it, and I know what I'm doing. Checklists, other places can also really help this. So PR checklists, development checklists, and that tries to reduce the amount of tasks that are missed. So Whether I expect you to do a task, or me, or Bob, whatever, it's on that checklist and it's ticked off when it's done. So if I look at that checklist and it's not ticked, doesn't matter who I thought was doing it, it's not done, it needs done. What you'll often find with those checklists is people will go, oh, forgot that again, I'll automate it, and now all of a sudden you've made things way better. Decision records also help to coordinate the chaos a wee bit. So whenever everything is so chaotic, your priorities are probably really different than in a team that isn't chaotic. For example, if I have loads of things that need done really, really quick, I'm not going to implement a framework that nobody in the team has any experience with. It's going to take 3 months to ramp up on. I'm probably going to pick the thing that the team has experience in. And writing that down in a decision record is really important. So then once the team does calm a little, you can look at that and say, okay, I understand why that decision was made then, but right now that's maybe not the best technical decision for our team. So key takeaways. So these are a few things that I think probably every team can implement, whether you feel like you're toxic or not, and things that I feel our team really couldn't have done without. So the first is camaraderie. With remote first especially, this can have a huge impact on the team, especially if it's toxic. So how did we actually go about achieving this? The first thing we did that changed things was getting into a shared workspace. So we started going into the office once a week. And like, it was probably the least productive day of the week, let's be honest. But we went for lunch together, we would go out and play mini golf after, we would go axe throwing, and it was just really lovely. Like the next day then, when everything was really frantic again, you go, you know, it's okay. Like I'm with people that I like, I'm with my teammates, it's fine. This is going to sound really cheesy, but I'm going to say it. We implemented check-in questions, which half the team, I think, didn't really like initially. And once we started doing them, actually, it made things way easier. So on our previous project, the whole team pretty much was new. None of us knew each other. So we started implementing these check-in questions for our stand-ups in the morning. So on a Wednesday, we had Wellbeing Wednesday, where we would ask things like, what do you do to switch off in the evenings, or what are you really proud of this week? And then on a Friday, we would have a Feel-Good Friday, which could be anything. Like, I think one of the best ones that was asked was, if you could move anywhere in the world, where would it be and why? It sounds cheesy, I get it, but it really helped the team get to know each other quite quickly without having to interrupt our project time very much. Including people also made a huge difference here. So include team members in discussions, even if you think they don't need to be there. They might think they need to be there. And even if they're not there, share the outcomes. Let them see this decision was made here, and maybe all of a sudden they'll go, oh, maybe I should have raised this. And just try and make everybody feel as included as if you were having the meeting in a room in front of them in the office. The next thing is proper process. So without process, everything's just a mess, really. You'll miss deadlines, you'll not be able to scale your team very well, you'll not be able to adapt to changes in the team. There'll be really low morale because nobody knows what the hell is going on. So how can you achieve a proper process? There were a few things we did. So the checklists, like a development feature checklist, the ADRs. We also had release checklists, which just made sure whenever we released, we told the right people, we did everything we needed to do for the wider business, etc. Jira process, which I guess most teams will have with whatever your chosen tool is, but it's really important that everybody has a shared understanding of what that process is, and the QA is involved right at the start, not at the end, not an afterthought. Sprint ceremonies, whatever works for your team, but a few of the things that we found really helpful were to add in a review at the end of every sprint with a small demo so everybody could actually see what we had been working on, and our retro every sprint to make sure we've got that short feedback loop, which I'll talk a wee bit about in a minute. We also had PR checklists and templates. These weren't very long, but it forced a developer to think about what is included and what they should include in their PR. So retros then, I guess everybody probably does, but there's a few things that you should try to avoid that also a lot of people do. So you want to avoid making people feel unheard. And I can guarantee that loads of people sat there and went, I don't make people feel unheard. But some people do without realising it. So if you don't have a very big team, I personally believe that voting on items, not a good call. If somebody thought it was important enough to put something on that retro board, give them the time to talk about it. Even if you don't think it's important, it was important enough to them. You want to avoid finger pointing. Like the aim of a retro should be to make things better, not to appoint blame to anybody. You also want to try and avoid deja vu. If somebody's bringing up the same thing every week in a retro or every 2 weeks, whatever your cadence is, start to ask yourself, why is it coming up? Are the items not clear enough? Do I not understand the problem? Are they not being addressed? Or actually, are they a symptom of something bigger that I should be trying to address? This one you see all the time. People think a retro isn't as important as anything else, and they're distracted. They're on their phone, they're looking at emails, they're writing code. Treat it with as much respect as any other meeting, because it is as important. So what did we do to try and help our retros? Switch her up, change the template. There's loads of templates out there, but be cautious with the one you choose. In a toxic team, confrontational headings can be really detrimental. Like, I hated sounds really confrontational. Maybe I disliked or I wished would be better. Allow time for people to add items to the retro. So we opened our retro the entire sprint, and give people the space they need. Sometimes, whilst retros should be constructive, maybe somebody just needs 5 minutes to rant. Let them do it. Listen to them, and they might feel better. That's me. There's probably loads of other stuff, but I'm welcome to any questions. Yes. Nope.
Yeah, there's a question down here. Oh, I'll do it. Okay, I'll run. Let's go.
Hello, thank you. That was really good. Thank you.
I'm really sorry. I can't hear.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. This was very good. Thank you. My question was about the retro. Mm-hmm. So obviously we put points onto cards to kind of get through them all in time.
Yeah.
So how would you do that how would you get through all the cards without the points?
So one of the things we tried to do is lump them together. So if there's loads and loads of items like that, we would first look to see, like, maybe there's 6 of them that are all around deployment process, for example, and then you can put points on that as a whole. So that's 6 items all of a sudden that I'm addressing in one go rather than not doing it. But like, if you've loads and loads of items on your retro board that you can't get through in the time that you've got for your retro, you've probably got a few issues, and maybe a longer retro or a retro split over a couple of different sessions would be useful.
Brilliant. Who else? Here we go. We did have somebody who was supposed to run around, but I shall instead. Here we are.
Thank you so much, Hannah. This process can be exhausting and demotivating. So I want to know what you found the most, I suppose, motivating and most exciting part of changing that environment, and what you enjoyed about the process.
I wasn't expecting hard questions. I guess for me, whenever we went through this in our recent project, it was really late on before the whole team realised that the team was as toxic as it was, which kind of made me feel like the leadership within the team was doing a really good job. But the thing that I think was probably the most enjoyable to implement and had the biggest impact on our team was the in-person days. As soon as we started implementing, coming into the office once a week or twice a week with no pressure, like, that's probably quite important to say. Like, if people had other commitments, it didn't matter that they weren't in one week, they come in the next. That was the first thing that really turned around things for our project, I think.
Thank you so much.
Okay, folks, probably got time for one last question. Anybody else? No? Oh, one more.
Hi. Following up from the last audience member's question, in terms of motivation, and there's a certain element of sheep herding in managerial roles. Have you seen, or do you have any opinion on, or perhaps even other members of the audience, gamification? So incentivizing people through automatic rewards or any kind of a system like that that you've seen in any of these kinds of workflows. I'm talking about kind of Duolingo for project management. Does it exist?
Yeah. I've not seen anything, but from my experience, I would say that I also don't feel like I've ever been in an environment where I've needed it. Like, I feel like whenever we had to try and turn around this team and this project, whenever things started getting better, that was enough for team members to feel like, you know what, I'm getting what I need from this now. I, as the lead of the team, never felt like I needed to encourage people more to get on board, because once we started building that trust, they trusted that, oh, this really cheesy thing she's making me do, it's there for a reason. And then they were confident enough to tell me, I was shite, don't do that again. Do you know what I mean? I never felt like we needed something like that.
Well done. Everybody, thank you so much, Hannah. And we're going to be back in 10 minutes for QA testing. So one last round of applause for Hannah, and thank you.